the guy, but there's just something about Larry. And it took us a couple months before we actually got together, but it was instant camaraderie. This is my brother, and I didn't know his story. I didn't know much about him. I just knew he was a really cool guy that I wanted to have a friendship with ongoing. And I don't have the opportunity that often to make a lot of friends. And so I'm very appreciative of that. But I'm going to read a little blurb, just so that you know that he's more than just my friend, because I don't ask all my friends to come and speak at a big fish event. So let me tell you a little bit about him. Larry Carrino has been involved in nonprofit work for a quarter century in the church, the parachurch, and various higher educational institutions. He has taught in many forums, the college and graduate school classroom, oversees training nationals for doing pastoral ministry, conducting seminars and conferences all over the country, and of course, in the pulpit as a minister for many years. The founder of 3 churches, he holds 4 earned degrees, including a PhD in theology, and has a passion for relating transcendent truths to people from all walks of life. Larry lives in Burnsville with his wife, Jackie. His sons, Daniel, 19, and Stephen, 17, and they're 2 pugs. And I love this when people do this. His 2 pugs are named Frank and Marie. I love it when people give human names to dogs. It doesn't sound right, but it just makes me smile. It's like Dr. Matt, his dog's name is George. Here, George, it just doesn't sound right. So that's a little bit about Larry. He's got a lot to share. Give him your attention, learn something, feel something, and welcome to Big Fish. Larry.
There we go. Awesome.
Do a few words.
How's it throat clear? Does that work clear?
There you go.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you sincerely for being willing to have me come and speak to you this weekend, and I want to especially thank my friend and my brother, Jeff Danielson, for asking me to come and do this as well. When I sat in Jeff's office on invitation this past summer, went up to his beautiful office, and we went upstairs where his private office was, and I had to tell you, he was so excited to have me come and speak here. I'd given a few presentations at a business networking group that we belong to together, and he heard my brother-in-law, Jeff, who is a big fan and a patient of his, go on, and he invited me. And as soon as he invited me, I got to be honest with you, I smiled. Do you ever have one of those smiles that comes deep down from inside of you because you know something that they don't? Some of you have Googled me on the internet, and you're smiling too. And it's that smile that I want to talk to you about this weekend. And that smile is one of the reasons I'm here this weekend. Our subject is leadership. You see, it's very fashionable to say nowadays self-depreciating things like, I don't deserve to be here today, or I'm not worthy of this honor or that honor. But the events of my life over the past 5 years have brought me to the lowest point that any human being can possibly imagine. I am almost 50 years old, and for the majority of those years, I enjoyed a certain level of success. I achieved goals, I gained positive notoriety, and it really helped other people in the process. And then back in 2008, I crashed and burned. I went from famous in my little pond to infamous in a much bigger pond. And before I get into any of that this afternoon, I want to remind you again that our theme is leadership. And if I were to give a title to this talk other than leadership is deep. I'm going to be talking about the depth of leadership this afternoon. We're going to be talking about the width of leadership tomorrow morning and the height of leadership tomorrow afternoon. I would rather give this title, How I Miserably Failed, and I'd like to teach you as well. You might think, no one wants to fail. How many of you would like to fail in life? Now don't answer this question. How many of you have failed in life? Here's the bigger question. How many of you will fail in life? Statistically, there's a very, very good chance that your life will continually change as the years go on. We'll talk about that as well. Now, you may be sitting here this morning saying, wow, this is kind of a depressing talk. Don't get you depressed, because there's a very, very powerful truth we want to bring out here this weekend, and one that I pray will inspire you, one that has inspired me. This weekend, let me tell you what I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about success and what success involves. I'm not going to talk about popularity. I'm not going to talk about wealth. And I'm not going to talk about achievement. I'm quite sure that in a group like this, we've got represented here a lot of very, very bright minds, and very diligent hearts, and very ambitious souls, enough to fill the Midwest with very successful chiropractic offices. I have nothing to bring to you to teach to you about success, even though I've enjoyed some of it myself. I want to talk to you about what it takes to be a leader this weekend. And I'd like to offer myself as an example of what to do, but more importantly, what not to do. Before I do that, I'd like to start with a story. A few years ago, a businessman was scheduled to embark on a month-long business trip overseas. Although he lived in Chicago, he had to connect in New York first at JFK to be able to get to his destination. And so when he was in Manhattan, a few weeks before his departure, he went into a local bank and he applied for a short-term loan to cover the expenses for his business trip. He asked for a $50,000 loan for the month. And the loan officer looked up his credit. His credit was very good, and he gave him an 8% loan for his business expenses. Sounded good to the man, so he took out his pen, ready to sign the check, when the loan officer said, wait, there's just one more thing I need to mention to you. Because you're going to be out of the country for an extended period of time, there's something that we're going to need to hold of value for collateral, because for all we know, you just be leaving the country for good. So too much to his surprise, the businessman said, you know, I'm aware of that, and I'm prepared to offer to you my brand new Ferrari to hold as collateral against this loan. And so that was fine with the loan officer. The paperwork was completed. A few weeks later, the man drove from Chicago to New York. Before he got on the plane, the car was safely driven to the basement garage of the bank for safekeeping. He went on his business trip. A month later, he returned, and as soon as he returned, he sat down with the loan officer and said, I'm prepared to pay you back in full. The man was shocked, and he said, you realize you have a little bit of time to pay this loan off. He said, I totally understand that, but I'd like to pay it off right now. How much do I owe you? So the man looked, and he calculated the interest. He said, well, with interest, your $50,000 loan is now $50,054. Great. So the man wrote out a check. He promptly handed it to the loan officer and got ready to leave. And the man said, hold on a second. You know, I got to be honest, when you were gone, I thought this whole thing was really strange to begin with. I checked you out, and I found out that you are a multi-millionaire. I got to ask you honestly, what in the world would make you want to come in here and borrow $50,000 to cover expenses for a business trip? And he said, you know why? He says, because where else in Manhattan can you get a parking space for a month for $54? As professionals, we are very proud of our ingenuity. And for a lot of years, I relied on my ingenuity. We're always looking for newer and better and faster and more efficient ways of doing things. And while this is fine in and of itself, it never exists in and of itself. Please get this down in your mind this afternoon. Ingenuity is fine in and of itself, but it never exists in and of itself. Do you know what you bring into everything you do? You bring you. For almost 25 years, I was the pastor of a church in New York on Long Island. specifically. This is notoriously a very, very hard place to start a ministry. In fact, if you know your map and you look at the map of the United States, that's kind of in the upper right-hand corner of the map. They literally call that the casket corner. The reason for that in ministry is because that's where churches go to die. The average church is well under 100 people, and rarely will you find any churches in New York anywhere near the size of churches you find out here. There are many reasons for that, which is beyond our scope this afternoon. But as a committed follower of Jesus Christ, having come to faith while actually pursuing a career to be a veterinarian, I was on my way to vet school. God changed my life around. He turned my heart around, my life around. So I went to study in Chicago for the ministry and then went on to California. I founded a church with only 17 people in a living room back in 1987. And those were sweet years of simplicity and authenticity and genuine growth, both not only in the width of the congregation, but also in its depth. And so I continued my schooling. I wrote books and articles and sat on a denominational board and taught here and overseas to undergrad and graduate students. I launched 2 other churches that are still going strong today. I trained men who are still serving God, both in the position of a pastor and as missionaries. And toward the end of my tenure at the church, I tendered my resignation under good terms, looking to move on to do a teaching ministry outside the church. I was one of those rare pastors that was dying to be a layperson. And everything was going well. Sure, it was a lot of hard work and sacrifice, but the rewards in changed lives was priceless. And that's when I started to become a victim of my own success. I let my guard down. I stopped taking care of my heart. I started looking in places other than where I should be looking. And during that time, believing that I was above temptation and vulnerability, I fell into an inappropriate sexual relationship with 2 people in my congregation, 2 women. What made the facts so unbelievable was that through my personal history, if there was an area of my moral life in which I had shown, it was the area of sexual purity. I only dated nice Christian girls growing up. I never went to parties. I never crossed the line. On my wedding night, I was very happy to say something that nowadays most people aren't too proud of, but I was a virgin. And I was congratulated within the family of faith for my commitment to morals and purity. I never smoked. I've never been drunk my entire life. I never took drugs. I didn't hang out with people who did. I was the proverbial good boy. And I entered into the ministry with the best of expectations. And I'll be honest with you. If you were to ask anyone in my family or my church if I were capable of such a thing, they would have laughed at you. And 5 years later, many of them are still scratching their heads, wondering what brought me to the point of making the outrageously bad decisions that I made. Let me be very clear here. Everything I did was my fault. I don't make excuses for it. I'm not going to spin it. I'm not going to sanitize it. I'm not going to make it sound any better than it is. What I did was despicable, and there is no amount of criticism that I have ever received that can even begin to equal the self-loathing I have experienced over the last number of years. Until finally, I wasn't found out. I couldn't live a double life anymore. I felt trapped inside a prison of my own making, and so I finally confessed. All within 2 days. This was an incredible 2 days. First to my wife, then to my children, then to my family, my extended family, then the church leadership, then the superiors in my denomination, then my congregation. Part of me felt like dying. The other felt an incredible relief. I was taking the first steps away from being the fraud that I had been during this period of my life, during this despicable season. Well, as you can imagine, when you out yourself, you out the people involved with you as well. And these 2 individuals launched a civil lawsuit against me and the church for abuse of power against the church, claiming that they knew all along and wrongly retained me as a leader. Their attorney, a known media hound, splashed the story in the headlines, and I was exposed as everything, represented as everything but a predator, a sex addict, a deceiver, you name it. And I have to be honest, I was lied about incredibly. There were many things that were said about me that were untrue. We stopped there for a minute. Just as a PS, the lawsuit ended. It was thrown out. there were many things that were discovered that were not true. But there was enough that was true that brings what I did to amount to a tremendous failure. The things that were lied about, timelines, events, many things that were purely fictitious, but there was enough that was true to make it matter. Now please understand me, and I do mean this from the bottom of my heart. I deserved everything I got. I lied, and so I was lied about. I defiled the very principles I believed in. I offended my God, my wife, and my church. Let me tell you something about how gracious my God has been. My wife would be here today, but she works till 9. She will be coming tonight and will be here tomorrow. She has been an incredible expression of God's grace to me. We are closer than we ever have been. My boys and I enjoy a relationship that I could only hope a father and his sons can enjoy, and I don't deserve any of it. I really don't, but God has given it to me anyway. And that's changed me in a very powerful way. I don't stand before you this weekend on the merits of my abilities. I stand before you in sharing my heart with you and saying, there's a lot of talented people in this room. And you know how I know that? I know what it takes to be a chiropractor. My son, Stephen, wants to be a chiropractor. And when I shared with him how much schooling it's going to take, his face went like this to this, you know. And I said, don't worry about it, you know, you don't have to do it all in a week. I have a tremendous respect for this profession. My brother-in-law, who has now passed away, my sister's husband, was a physical therapist. And being in a very similar profession as you, and being in the helping professions, I have a tremendous respect for what you do. If you're involved with Jeff Danielson and the people like Dr. John and others, I know your quality. And that's a great thing, but take it from me. Please learn from what I did wrong. Don't allow your success to be the cause of your failure. There's a story in Matthew 14 where the disciples are in a boat. So a lot of you are probably very familiar with it. And they're in the middle of a storm. They're in the Sea of Galilee, and all of a sudden, the Sea of Galilee is a very interesting body of water. It could be great one minute, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's an incredible storm. It's a lot like being in Minnesota. I've never ever experienced anything like, again, I'm from the East Coast. You know, weather can come in very, very quickly. So they're out in the middle of a little rowboat, and all of a sudden this horrible storm hits them. And they see Jesus coming out and walking on the water. It doesn't happen every day. It wasn't ice. And he's walking out on the water, and Peter, always the impetuous one, says, hey, I want to come out and walk with you. So he gets out of the boat, and by the power of God, he's walking on the water as long as he's looking at Jesus. And as soon as he gets distracted by the wind and the waves and everything else going about him, he starts to sink. Let me ask you a question. Do you think there's a lesson in that? There are things that you are destined to do, and there's a goal that you need to keep your eyes on. Let's be honest tonight, this weekend. And I want to echo what Jeff said as well. Open yourselves to learn this weekend. Open yourselves to really be honest with yourself. If there was anything I've learned the last 5 years that has benefited me more than I can ever express, it's the art of being honest with yourself. Do you know how few people are typically and habitually honest with themselves? It's a very, very hard thing to do. And yet it is one of the things that make people leaders. As a result of this whole fiasco, I lost my church, and for a time, I lost my friends. I can happily say I got them all back. That's amazing. Not through any doing of my own. It was God's grace. I lost my reputation, my dignity, and every sense of self-worth. But what I gained in return, however, was something more valuable than anything I lost. Something that God is using to make me a better leader than I ever could have been in the best days of my ministry. And it's not because I'm a better man because of it. Please, can I say that again? It's not because I'm a better man because of it. I'm not a better man. I'm not even a good man. I have seen in my life what I am capable of. And it is despicable, and it is ugly, but it has forever changed me to steer clear of those things. The Nobel Prize winner, Elie Wiesel, some of you may have heard of him before. He wrote the famous award-winning book, The Night. He was a Romanian Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. And when he was liberated by the American Third Army from Auschwitz, and he was brought to the United States. When the Nuremberg war trials in Germany were held, he was asked to attend. And as an Auschwitz survivor, he came and he sat in the gallery as some of the SS soldiers were talking about the atrocities they had committed against the Jews. And he had gone with a very good friend of him who was sitting right next to him, and the man just began to weep. Can you imagine what it must have been like to listen to that and having lived it? And so his friend, understandably, is trying to console him. He says, you know, Ellie, I feel so bad for you. I know this has been terrible. And he stopped his friend. He said, do you think I'm crying because of what I went through? No, no, no. Listen to this. He said, I look at that man, and what I realize is that I have in my heart what he's capable of. I'm capable of doing exactly the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, understanding that is where leadership begins. This is why I'm here this weekend, not merely to function as a cautionary tale, although please take from my story what it takes to help you to understand two things. Number one, please don't miss this. Leadership does not come from your perceived assets or liabilities. You have both. Did you realize that? You bring into your life, you bring into your practice assets and liabilities. Leadership doesn't come from either of them. Through the course of your life and your career, you will do things you are proud of, and you will do things you're ashamed of. What you are is more than the sum of them both. Number two, leadership comes from the deepest part of who you are. Success comes from your abilities, from your investment in yourself, from the time you commit, from your discipline, from how much you're willing to put into something. All we hear about today is success, and success is fine. But there are a lot of successful people who aren't leaders. Because leadership has got to reach in and grab your guts and pull them out. Ask anyone who has ever led and has written on it, spoken on it, or lived it, and they will tell you the same thing. We hear a lot about achieving our goals and reaching our dreams. Do you know that a Harvard Business School study conducted back in 2009 polled 3,652 students? They were from business schools all across the country, on the verge of graduating and entering into the workforce. This is what they found. They concluded that most students do not trust the institutions they were preparing to enter, whether they were going into the banking world or large corporations or Wall Street, and here's why. Not because of their failures and not because of their imperfections, but because of their lack of authenticity. One Columbia graduate student put it this way: I can relate to people who are less than perfect. God knows I'm less than perfect. What I can't trust is the current enterprise of promising the world and creating a false sense of security for us because they can't bring themselves to tell us the truth. Leadership is authentic because it runs deep. It's not pretentious. It doesn't rely on its past accomplishments or perceived strengths. It projects its heart toward the people it serves. I'm going to say that again. It projects its heart toward the people it serves. You show me a leader, and I'll show you someone with a very rare heart. And that heart is acquired by being broken. I know that that seems to fly in the face of every aspect of current wisdom today, but please let me tell you, if I were to put 100 leaders before you today, simply based on what they've said about themselves, they tell you the same thing. What we're here about this weekend is not success. You are part of an excellent organization, and you are around excellent people who can teach you excellently. You don't need me to come in here to talk to you about success. Leadership? Let me ask you a question, and do me a favor, don't answer this. Don't put your hand up, answer it to yourself. How many of you want to be a leader? And we're going to be looking this weekend a little bit more into what exactly does that mean. In 1991, a movie about an aloof, self-centered, but extremely successful heart surgeon hit the big screen. Some of you may have seen it. It starred William Hurt and Christine Lottie, and it was simply called The Doctor. How many of you have seen that movie before? I suggest you do in the medical profession. What this character clearly lacked was a sense of compassion and humanity that makes leaders what they are. Oh, he healed patients. He was a great, great staffer. But he lacked the very heart that makes leaders special. He was cold, and he was uncaring, and he believed that professional dissonance is the way you do your job. And that all changed. He didn't attend a seminar on sensitivity. He didn't read Oprah. He got cancer and became a patient. And as a patient, the tables were turned, and now he realized what his patients went through and what they yearned for beyond the professionalism of his job. And what he learned through that time was a compassion and a heart that turned him from simply being a world-class surgeon to being a leader. You see, his heart got broken, and as a result, he was able to touch the hearts of others. As many of you know and have heard in the news recently, the president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, a great leader, died within the last week. He was a Nobel Prize winner, as you know, former president of South Africa. He was larger than life. I saw CNN a couple of days ago, and Bill Clinton was on. And they were interviewing him about his relationship with Mandela, and he said something that really, really hit me very hard. He was president during some of the most important aspects of Mandela's political life, and he said, you know, we'd be on the phone all the time to each other. We talked about policy, we talked about apartheid, we talked about so many of the things that Mandela is known for. And then he stopped and he paused, and he almost broke down. He said, you know, but what meant the most to me about Nelson Mandela was that every time he would call, he'd always ask me about Hillary and Chelsea. And if Chelsea was still up, you know, remember this big time difference, he would ask her to get on the phone. And he'd spend like 20 minutes with her, just asking her about her schooling and about her life. He said, that's what I remember about Nelson Mandela. That's what made him great. He was married 3 times. He was divorced twice. He was a self-admitted ladies' man. He was a convict. He was someone who was called no saint by those closest to him, including his biographer, Anthony Sampson. But this man had the essentials of leadership forged into him through pain and through failure. Forbes magazine defined leadership this way in a recent article dated April 9th, 2013. Leadership has nothing to do with seniority or one's position in the hierarchy or company. Leadership has nothing to do with titles. Leadership has nothing to do with personal attributes. Leadership isn't management. What is it? Bill Gates said, as we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who inspire others. John Maxwell said, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Leadership involves social influence, not authority or power. It is the ability to help others organize their efforts, but more so to maximize them. Leaders are people who other people want to be around. I can't emphasize that enough. Leaders are people who other people want to be around because they know how to bring out the best in the people around them. For years, I was a leader, organizationally at least. Over the past 5 years, my heart is broken, my world has gotten smaller, and my reputation has gotten soiled, but my capacity to lead has grown. Does that sound crazy? Ask any leader. That's how it works. And I'm here as a human being speaking to other human beings about the importance of developing and maintaining your humanity so that you can powerfully reach others as a leader. That's where I'd like to go with you this afternoon in our opening session, to share with you some important truths that I've learned about leadership the hard way. So that when you fail, and you will, you may never fail as big as I did, it doesn't matter. When you fail, and you will, and don't be afraid of it, you can take some of those lessons and allow them to shape your heart as a leader. Take a look at a couple of things. I'm going to start with a great sage and great mind of our generation. I figured I'd go with the big guns to begin with. Let me tell you why I chose Paula Abdul. I wanted to choose somebody from the entertainment world where image is everything. She said this: Everyone is your best friend. When you're successful, make sure that the people who you surround yourself with are the people you're not afraid of failing with. My prayer for Big Fish is that among all the other things that you do here, that you grow into a group of people who aren't afraid to fail in front of one another. No one's afraid to succeed in front of one another. But when you fail, who's going to catch you? One of the characteristics of a leader is someone who doesn't believe their own press. Becoming enamored with one's own accomplishments is a subtle thing. It really is. It doesn't happen overnight, and it comes with a complete list of rationalizations as to why you're really not becoming enamored with your own abilities. You convince yourself that you're humble, and you're proud of your humility. Did you get that? Let that sink in for a minute. You're proud of your humility. That's why you need to remain grounded with people who love you and are not impressed with you. Safe people who will be there when your not so impressive side comes out. Listen to those people. There is a reason most successful people have few to no friends. That's a fact. They only have admirers. It's lonely at the top, you've heard that, but it's dangerous when it's lonely. Screenwriter Kevin Smith, another person from the image-oriented Hollywood industry, said there's something to be said for failing. It's not the failure you feel, it's the failure that most people project when something disappoints. You're back to zero where there's no expectations, he said, and it's kind of where I like to be. The pressure's off. One of the critical components of being a leader is to be someone with nothing to lose because you've let go of everything you deem so valuable. Now listen to me for a second. There's two ways to be someone who has nothing to lose. Everything has been taken away from you, that's not the good way. Or you've let go of everything and said, you know what, my mission is to reach others and everything else is negotiable. That's what makes great leaders. You will never be a man or woman of conviction by holding on to privileges you're not willing to let go of. Please, please don't forget that. You will never be a man or a woman of conviction if you are not willing to let go of certain privileges that you're not willing to let go of. It reminds me of the man who accidentally almost skied off the side of a cliff one time, only to find himself hanging precariously by the side of the cliff. And so he hung there, suspended between space and earth, crying, "Help! Help!" A few seconds later, this booming voice comes out of heaven. Remember the God voice, right? "I can help you." And he looked up and he said, "What do I do? What do I do?" And he said, "Let go." He said, thought for a second, he said, "Is there anybody else up there who can help me?" Why? We don't want to let go. There are things that we believe that are so absolutely essential to our success that they take away from what's inside of us. I'd like you to consider an illustration with me for a moment. This triangle represents you. And in the center is your heart. Now, I'm not talking about the pulmonary muscle in your chest, which I'm sure all of you as doctors know a lot about. I'm talking about the core of who you are. And on the left side of this are all the things that need to be wrested from our little fingers to help to make us leaders. The first thing that needs to be pried from our fingers is our perception of success. We have a very ill perception of success in America, and we'll get more into that tomorrow. Instead, we need to understand and have a proper perception of ourselves, and we'll be examining this a little bit more. And so our perception of success is this: I want to do this, and in order to do this, I need to be ambitious in doing it. So what do we hear over and over and over again in seminar after seminar and book after book? Work hard, strive hard, give hard, play hard, do all these things so you can achieve your goals. That's awesome. A lot of people do it, and a lot of people achieve their goals. Guess what they don't become? Who's with me today? Guess what they don't become? Become leaders. You know why? Because they're very busy pursuing their goals. They've created a little bubble. What leadership does is it changes your perception of yourself. And if you're a chiropractor here, if you're a support staff, if you're a massage therapist, whatever it is that you do, let me make very clear, this is going to sound very politically correct, but I'll go into this tomorrow as to why this is the case. They're really, I'm a layperson. I'm none of those things, okay? I'm the guy that comes into the doctor's office, so I'm the guy you want to listen to. I'm the guy that writes the bills. I'm the guy that decides whether they're coming back or not. You could have the best chiropractor in the world and a lousy staff, and I don't want to come back. That's the truth. You are the first line. I've had doctors like that. And then I've had really wonderful staff and a doctor who had the bedside manner of a tombstone, okay? And I didn't want to go back either. The reality is this. Who's more important? Now you can say, well, the right thing to say is everybody. No, that really is true. Trust me, people vote with their feet. I've had really bad office staff. And I love my doctor, and I said, I really can't take this anymore. Or I've had it the other way around, and I really didn't want to be back either. So regardless of what you do, here's the bottom line. You need to be a leader. If you're at the desk, be a leader. Because people are going to want to come to the desk, and they want to see you. Here's the thing, though. The difficult thing about them wanting to see you is don't get fooled into thinking that it's all about you. They want to see you because of what you give to them. And what you give to them isn't a prompt appointment, isn't a nice smile, or isn't a little mint. It's part of your heart. It's showing them dignity, respect, care, things that you may think are very common nowadays, and they really aren't. That's what makes a leader. You lead that front office. You lead that massage room. You lead that area of the practice that people are going to converse in. That's your mission. Your mission is this, that I want to be the best me that I can be, listen carefully, so that I can give it away. That's not personal ambition. That's selfish ambition. That's selfless ambition. And what does it take to move from personal ambition to selfless ambition, a broken heart? And we'll be talking more about that as time goes on. We want to protect our cherished goals. Well, I'll be willing to do all this kind of stuff, but you know what? I can't do this. I can't give this up. And what happens more and more as you mature and become a leader is you realize you'll give up whatever it takes for you to give up to make the greatest impact. Let me give you a great example of what I'm talking about. The gentleman in the back with the baby. I'm sorry, I don't need to point you out again. Your name is?
Kyle.
Kyle? What's your baby's name?
Declan.
Declan. Okay. Kyle, before I was a parent, I was a typical guy. Okay. I knew when I got married to my wife, we were going to have children. I didn't want to have children, Declan. I really, really didn't. And here's why. Here was my thinking. What in the world is so great about kids? They're loud. They spit up all over the place. You can't ever go out anymore. They're incredibly expensive. And the list went on and on and on. I'd see women specifically, no offense, you know, just gush over babies. Oh, look, he burped. Oh, he cried. Oh, he did this and that. And I think to myself, oh, world, big deal. What is the big deal? And I prayed and I said, God, I really don't have the right heart for this. Please change it. From the second our son was conceived, not born, conceived, my whole heart changed. It was 180. Ask my kids now. I have a 19-year-old who looks like a linebacker. And he'll do the littlest of things and I'll be like, oh, he did that. Oh, he did that. And I'm looking at myself and saying, wow, I've been reduced to what I used to hate. You know why? Because I realized the value of what I didn't see before. I didn't learn, and I'll tell you the truth, they are expensive, and they do spit up all over the place, and they are very loud, and you're not able to go out. And all of the things that I thought was absolutely true, but my heart changed, and I was able to be a leader, and I was able to be a dad. I was willing to give things up in order to make an impact. And I'll tell you the truth, I've been a parent for almost 20 years. It is the most awesome thing in the world. You got a lot to look forward to. The projection of cherished values is what it's all about. We don't protect them, we project them. But what if I lose them? Then they were intended to be given away. Let me say that again. Your values are intended to be given away to other people. That's what makes it great. I believe you guys call it paying it forward, which I'm sure we'll be hearing about. Before we're leaders, we find satisfaction in performance. Oh, what a great job you did. Good job, you're great, all the rest. What we find after becoming a leader is submission to principles. What we mean by that is that we keep ourselves accountable so that we keep ourselves focused. And I can't begin to tell you how incredibly easy it is to lose focus. The question the leader needs to ask himself, and I see a number of you taking notes, please write this down. The question is not what do I do, but who should I be? There's two things, do and be. Now, do you need to do in life? Absolutely. But your doing always needs to serve your being. Here's why. By the time my world came crashing down in 2008, the destruction of my own making, my emphasis was on what I did, what I accomplished. And I'll be honest with you, by about the age of 44, I really did accomplish just about everything I wanted to do. There really wasn't much left on my bucket list. But God taught me what needed to change, and the focus was on being. What kind of person will I be? Let me tell you something. I can't be that person by myself. I need others to help me to do that. Our ambition as leaders is to carve out who we want to be. A lot of us have never even thought of this before. And to pursue that with a tenacity that is unparalleled by anything that we have pursued in our goals. Let me put it a different way. This is what leaders do. Leaders pursue who they are more than they ever pursue what they want to achieve. I used to want to earn a doctorate, and then I earned one. Big deal. Now, I want to learn to be more compassionate. I used to want to write books, and I wrote them. Now I want to be more understanding. I used to want to reach people's minds and hearts with what I knew. Now I want to reach them exactly where they're at. I used to want to be famous as someone who was accomplished in his field. Now I just want to be a servant and leave the rest to God. I got to be honest with you. Standing in front of a group of strangers and sharing my story with you is not fun. I'm proud of it. It really isn't. I don't care. Let me tell you why. If God uses this, and for some of you in this room, what I'm going to share with you this weekend, you'll use immediately. Some of you may not use it for 10 years. It doesn't matter. As long as it's used to your benefit, to His glory, that's what I care about. And I got to be honest with you, I'm still in process. But I told my wife that I would pursue my repentance twice as hard as I ever pursued my sin. That's what makes a leader. I want to leave you this afternoon with a story that has inspired me, and I pray will you as well, when you think of the importance of how you need to pursue the person you are rather than the things that you do. Wilma was willing to do whatever was necessary to overcome. She was born prematurely with complications that resulted in contracting double pneumonia, twice, and scarlet fever. She didn't get what you'd like to call a head start in life. A bout with polio also left her left leg crooked and her foot twisted inward. Large leg braces always seemed like such a nuisance. She recalls the bus rides to Nashville for the treatments that continued for 6 long years. And on the bus trips home, she would visualize herself someday being a parent with little children at her feet. She would tell her mother of her dreams, and that precious dear black mother would respond with such indelible, encouraging words. Honey, the most important thing in the world is to believe it and keep on trying. She began to believe at age 11. She would someday take those braces off. I should tell you that they worked out a plan where she would get on the bed and her leg braces would be taken off, and her brothers and sisters would massage her legs the way the doctor had ordered, but she wasn't satisfied with that. She made one of the siblings a watcher who would stand at the door so her parents wouldn't walk in on them and see her, and she would take those braces off, and despite the incredible pain, she would walk across the house to teach herself that she could do it. As a matter of fact, she was almost caught on one occasion. But finally, the day comes, we're on a routine visit to Nashville to see the doctor, Judgment Day. She told the doctor, I have something I'd like to share with you. She proceeded to take the braces off and walk across the exam room to where the doctor was sitting. She could feel her mother's eyes behind her as she walked, knowing that the actions that had brought her to this miraculous moment had been strictly against house rules. How long have you been doing this, the doctor friend? For the past year, she said. Not trying to look directly at her mother, I sometimes take the braces off and walk around the house. Well, the doctor said, since you've been honest in sharing that with me, sometimes I'll let you take them off and walk around the house. Well, that's all she needed. Sometimes was all she needed for never again. She never put those braces on another day of her life. Wilma turned 12, and she discovered that at that age, girls could also run and jump and play just like the boys. She had begun to explore a new horizon. She decided that she would conquer anything that had to do with girls' athletics. One of her sisters loved basketball, and so she decided to try out for the girls' basketball team with her sister Yvonne. She was crushed to learn, ultimately, that out of the 30 girls trying out for the team, that she wasn't even one of the 12 finalists. When she arrived home, she noticed the coach's car in the driveway. Oh no, she thought, he won't even let me break the news to my own parents that I didn't make the team. She ran around to the back door and entered the house quietly. The coach was explaining the time, and her sister would be home from practice, how many road trips there would be, and where they would go, and that would need a chaperone. Her father was not a man of many words, but when he spoke, you knew it. It was law. There's only one stipulation, he said, for my daughter joining the team. Anything you want, replied the coach. You see, my girls always travel in twos. And if you want Yvonne, you're going to have to take Wilma along as a chaperone. This wasn't exactly what the coach wanted to hear, but it was a start. And so one day she gathered up the nerve to confront her coach about her magnificent obsession. The 6-foot, 89-pound straggler came into his office one day and found him to be, as he always was, a big, gruff, direct guy. What do you want? He asked. She forgot her prepared speech and just kind of stood there, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Speak up! People who have important things to say, get them said. You don't state what it is, I'll never know what your problem is. Why are coaches always like that, by the way? Have you ever noticed that? And so she finally blurted out, if you give me 10 minutes of your time, and 10 minutes every day, I'll give you in return a world-class athlete. He laughed uncontrollably. Not certain he had heard correctly the audacity of her words, he turned to stop her as she left. Wait a minute. All right, I'll give you the 10 minutes, but remember, I'm going to be busy with real world-class athletes who are going to college and getting scholarships. She was so excited. She actually wore her gym clothes underneath her street clothes every day, and when the bell would ring, she was the first kid in the gym to receive her precious gift of 10 minutes of personal instruction. She was always second, however, and her sister was always first in basketball. And then came the end of the basketball season, and there would be chores to do around the house. And she wanted, therefore, to run winter track, now that there would be chores to do around the house if she stayed at home. And so she began to run. The first time she ran a race, she found she could beat the girlfriend. And then she beat all of the other girls in high school. And then she beat every high school girl in the state of Tennessee. At 14, a high school student, she joined the Tiger Bells track team and entered into serious training at Tennessee State University. One day, nearly 2 years later, a friend came to her and said, would you like to make our Olympic team? Do we get to travel? She asked. Yes. In fact, we're going to Australia. When do we leave? Was her next words. And so she went. And you may remember reading about the games that she went to back in 1956. She won a bronze for one of the races, but you know what? That wasn't enough. Even though she was a heroine now back home, she didn't take any of it for her own glory. She could have thumbed her nose at the kids in the neighborhood who had been so cruel to her when she was an invalid with those metal braces, but instead she just let them look at the bronze medal and she talked to them about the thrill that it had been to win. Now listen. To give herself the winner's edge, she resorted to a type of extracurricular do-it-yourself program for the next 4 years. When she realized that she was slipping behind the other girls on the team because of her work and her study load, she began sneaking down the dormitory fire escape to run the track from 8 to 10 every night. And And she would climb back up the fire escape into bed in time for lights out and bed check, but at sunrise, the grueling training began again. And every morning, she would run at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., and every afternoon at 3 a.m., week after week, year after year, for 1,200 days. When Wilma walked out into the field in the summer of 1960 in Rome, she was ready. The nearly 80,000 fans began to cheer wildly, convinced that she was one of those special Olympians who would capture the hearts of the spectators and of the world the way those special Olympians had before, such as Jesse Owens and Babe Dietrichson, and would be true in the future of Olga Korbut and Bruce Jenner. Welling up from the stands came the cadence chant, Wilma, Wilma, Wilma. There was never a doubt in her mind, nor in theirs. She turned in 3 electrifying performances. She easily won the 100-meter, the 200-meter, and the 400-meter relay that she ran the anchor on, not only placing first in each, but breaking the world record for all 3 events. She had been a little crippled black girl who rode the bus to Nashville, isolated from her neighborhood, but supported by her parents and a few friends. And now she was Wilma Rudolph, a living legend. There's an interesting quote that says, winning is great, sure, but if you're really going to do something in life, the secret is learning how to lose. Nobody goes undefeated all the time. If you can pick up after a crushing defeat and go on to win again, you're going to become a champion someday. You know who said that? Wilma Rudolph. Ladies and gentlemen, leadership is deep. Some of you sitting here this morning have experienced life's lessons in the failure that digs down into the core of who you are. Some of you haven't yet. Cherish them. Let them mold you. And when it does, use all of your persistence to pursue the heart of a leader. Calvin Coolidge said, nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. Some are too young to have done so as yet, but they're coming. When they do, remember this little talk we had this afternoon. For some, these truths won't benefit you for a while. My prayer for you is that when that time comes, you would fail well, because that's what every leader does. And as a result, you will succeed well, because your goal, instead of being inward, will now become outward. I'm going to leave you with the words of Bill Gates this morning, who said, it is fine to celebrate success, but it is more important to heed the lessons of failure. In case you weren't hearing me for the last hour, this is not a lesson about failure. It's a lesson about what is necessary to be a leader. The first thing we want to remember about leadership is that leadership is deep. It digs deep down into the core of who you are. Something that in our culture, I have to admit, we don't talk a lot about. Be successful, but don't let your success undo you. Be ambitious and persistent. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't ever waste your ambition on anything more than being rather than doing, because that is the heart of the leader.